Hello. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. As Mahatma Gandhi ji once said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Today, we are gathered here to explore how we as leaders can drive the change towards sustainability and prosperous future. Welcome to the Connect Season 4, co-hosted by Credible. I, Sakshi Sabu from Credible, welcomes you all to today's event. So let me introduce Credible ESG. Credible, a sustainable intelligence platform. We empower organizations to navigate their sustainability journey with precision and confidence. Our AI-powered solution enable, measure, manage, report on critical ESG metrics, including Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, waste, water, and climate risk. With over 100 customers, we specialize in decarbonization strategy, offering end-to-end traceability and regulatory compliance, which helping organizations meet global standards such as BRSR, CSRD, and TCFD, and many more. Trusted by industry leaders such as Flipkart, Myntra, Taj Hotels, IHCL. Credible is committed to deliver unparalleled accuracy and efficiency, driving sustainability and meaningful climate action into sustainable growth. At Credible, we believe creating real impact and turning complex ESG challenges into actionable insights. So, to begin with our first session, we have Mr. Aro Dondial, who is Chief of Staff and Head of Product at Credible, and Mr. Pranav Fadke, ESG Consultant. So, the first session is Global Regulatory Compliance in Sustainability. To kick off this, we have session that undergoes the importance of staying ahead in global regulatory requirements in sustainability, whether it's about maintaining compliance or using strategically enhanced marketing position. This session has it all. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Aro Dondial and Mr. Pranav Fadke.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here, and I'm sure more people are going to join. As Sakshi said, Credible is a sustainability tech platform. We also run a service called Seco, where we are trying to enable more people around topics like sustainability, climate change, decarbonization. Today, this room is dedicated to 4 tracks on sustainability, all delivered by deep experts in ESG, value chain sustainability, ratings, reporting. This particular session is on global regulatory compliances. So Pranav will open the dialogue, give us an overview of what ESG means, why it's important, and then we'll deep dive into some of the compliances. But this will also continue in other sessions, right? So this theme will kind of go on, where we, after looking at what the global landscape is, will go deep into climate risk, how you can manage and mitigate climate risk in your organization. Then we'll look at specific nuances around reporting in the second half, specifically around BRSR, GRI, the typical large frameworks, and also some niche frameworks. And then we'll finally go deeper into value chain sustainability, where not just your operations, but beyond your operations, how you bring value chain into the scope. So this room, Ruby Hall, is entirely dedicated to Credible, as well as the whole theme of sustainability, ESG, and responsible business. So over to you, Pranav.
Thanks, Haro. I hope I am audible to everyone. Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Pranav Fadke. I am a ESG and strategy consultant, basically working in this domain for now more than 8 years. I've advised a lot of companies across the globe, a lot of Indian conglomerates as well on the topic, and closely associated with Credible. And today we'll be discussing on sustainability and ESG, a bit more into the details around what are some of the key regulations and how basically the global landscape is evolving in this space. So as you can see, we have a packed agenda. Basically, we'll start with the rise of sustainability regulations. What is basically the difference between a regulation and a standard? Because That's a topic that is a bit more confusing for a lot of people. Then we'll be looking at some key global regulations, regional and sectoral differences of what are some of the regulations that are important for India, and if you are exporting to a lot of other geographies, such as EU, such as Middle East, such as APAC and North America, then why you should care about some of these regulations. And finally, we'll have some proactive approaches on how you can manage and mitigate and address and handle these regulations. So quickly, for everyone to be on the same page, just want to discuss a bit on what is ESG and what is sustainability. So these are very interchangeably used words. So in a conventional sense, sustainability would be basically, as per the Bundsman Commission report, to meet the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generation. And as you can see, this is a very broad concept and a very high level idea around sustainability. So it gets difficult to implement these kind of concepts into day-to-day practices, into a business decision making, because sustainability is more of I would say also a philosophical and a lifestyle choice and a concept. So there is the ESG framework, which can help break down this concept into specific tangible areas. So we have, for example, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. You have topics within environment like climate change, biodiversity, water, energy efficiency. And these are very measurable topics that you can measure. You can set targets around these topics. These will matter to you for your businesses, for individuals as well. So that's why these are the topics. So ESG basically provides a framework to see sustainability through a very clear lens of what are the topics that you should care about and focus around. So in social, for example, this could be equal opportunity, human rights, child labor. In governance, this could be business ethics, board independence, so these kind of topics. What is the case for sustainability now? Why this is gaining a bit of momentum these days? So firstly, of course, regulations are driving a global change. There are a lot of regulations coming and who have already come, and there is a lot of long pipeline also of these regulations up till 2030. So mainly the biggest driver would be the regulations, where we have BRSR framework in India, then there is the CSRD, EU taxonomy, and other such regulations. There is also a climate change factor, which is driving a lot of corporate strategy. Clients are required to are looking at these frameworks and are setting their own targets, being more ambitious, and setting their goals and objectives to help mitigate climate change. Although recently, I guess Trump has backed down from Paris Agreement. But there are a lot of these global volatilities that are happening, and which is even more focused that these kind of topics are here to stay, and corporates need to focus on some of these topics. So there is also an investor focus angle to ESG, where there is a push from investors to focus on ESG due diligence, to improve companies' ratings on ESG metrics, ESG performance targets. There is also inequality, which is driving a stakeholder activism topics. There is evolving consumers and their purchasing behaviors. And finally, there is the ethical supply chain across and implementing sustainability across the value chain. So there are a lot of regulations that we'll also talk soon in much more details. For example, Germany has launched CSDDD. There is a lot of these deep dive regulations which will impact the entire supply chain of a large conglomerates. So why sustainability is important is because basically companies don't operate in a vacuum. There is impact of social and environmental trends on companies and on investments, and there is impact of companies on environment and social challenges. So both of these things are very strongly intertwined, irrespective of what the priority is within an organization for these topics. Nevertheless, the interchangeability and intermingling of this topic is strongly there. And so, just want to touch upon and give an overview of what are some of the key regulations that are growing in this space. So, as you can see, there has been an explosion of ESG and sustainability regulations in recent years. Originally, in 2021, we would say something around 23 ESG-related regulations would be there. These would be broad regulations. And right now, up to last few years ago, up to 2023 data we have, which is these regulations have increased by 500%, more than 500% to 150 regulations. And these would be ranging from topics like mandatory climate reporting, where companies need to put out what are the steps they are taking to make their products more greener, to decarbonize their supply chain, decarbonize their operations, and manufacture more cleanly, more efficiently. There are regulations around assurance, where they need to audit their statements. There is around diversity and inclusion, supply chain, so whole host of regulations. And then there are sector-specific regulations also. Regulations applicable for example, for aviation, for shipping, where they can't use certain fuels, they can't use certain chemicals. These kind of regulations are also increasing. So yeah, as you can see, just increasing trend. So from 2017 onwards to 2024, there is explosion of regulations because although there has been other drivers like investor pressure or consumer pressure, it's a cycle. Basically, all of these are also feeding into the regulations, where politicians and regulators are also more open to implement and enforce these regulations, because there is investor pressure, because there is consumers also demanding, because there is other aspects also. So as you can see, regulations around, for example, climate change, environment, health and safety, conflict minerals, ESG reporting have been on an increasing trend. And if we believe this trend continues, then there will be even more regulations, even more granular regulations, based on the size of the companies, based on the sectors. So that's the trend that we are seeing mostly. Just want to check if you know any few regulations from a domestic or a global point of view. Any inputs here? Would love to hear from all of you. What are your thoughts? So do you think it's these regulations are helping, or they are it's difficult to comply? What are your thoughts on those? If anybody would like to share. Yes.
Fine. So basically, there are so many regulations in place that it really becomes very difficult which to select, which not to select, whether. So from the country perspective, first you have to look into, and that's where, first of all, the BRSR, which has come now, so which is a mandatory thing. But yes, of course, it all also depends on where you are, where your market is, where you want your presence to be felt. So accordingly, you need to look into those areas, those country-related regulations as well. So that's what my take is. But certainly, so many of them, it makes you confused, really.
That's a great point, actually.
Hello.
Because what I like about this is that it's not just regulatory pressure that's in your, let's say, nation or your region, but if you are, for example, exporting to Europe and your buyers are European buyers, they would expect you to disclose in a format they understand. So they will say, let's comply to the European standard. And then India is still quite a heavy exporter of goods and services. So it could fan out to you complying with Australian regulations, European, all over the globe, right? So that's a very interesting point, and we'll address that also a little bit.
Yeah, and also, so it's important that there is some consolidation also that happens in these regulations, because a lot of times within the country also different departments have different expectations, different regulations are also not talking to each other. which is what is happening in EU also will look a bit more closely. But yeah, there is also a need to consolidate. If you are already reporting a few KPIs to one regulation, it should not be different aspects to other regulations. So yeah.
There is like a green building, green complex, green entire town, which is now famous. And in Gujarat and other places, it's like a 20 lakh square feet area. Everything is under green. They have a 3 categories like silver, gold, and platinum. Based on whatever criteria you have in the building, they give the rating of that building. And it is sustainable in earthquake or any other thing whenever comes. That entire building is made in that way.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And a lot of companies are proactively going for these green building certifications and getting these because it helps both in basically improving the operational efficiency. You save a lot of water, you save a lot of energy, but it also is a great marketing and a branding tool where you can communicate. I know DLF and a lot of properties are actively communicating on these areas also.
I think another point there is, if you are a green building, you can also sometimes tap into green finance, right?
Yes.
There are finances that are earmarked for.
There are specific channels.
Correct.
Because they are all big builder.
Correct.
Small builder doesn't know. And
Right,
because
right.
that cost and
So that's the
infrastructure you
leverage.
should have in such a
Correct.
way that then only you can make it. And this entire square feet area, it is like a Shivalik, and there are many builders. Even Doubletree Hilton in Ahmedabad. Okay, that is this entire hotel is in that building.
Correct, correct.
They have got certificate
Most
of the
hotels,
gold
IGBC
eco.
certificate.
I don't know
they'll have,
everyone,
yeah,
but
yeah.
wherever I go,
Correct.
because I have covered 1,500 events like this in last 15 years.
Right.
Almost all kind of events.
Correct.
So when I go, then first time I came to know, okay, this hotel is like Doubletree by Hilton on Sindhu, that road in Satellite.
Yeah.
It is entire building is like in eco this
Correct.
category, green building.
Right. So I think
So
everyone.
there are very few hotels. I don't know whether there is someone.
There are
something
many
is-
hotels.
Only but I don't
Surprisingly,
know,
there are
because
many
My
hotels.
first time
Yeah.
I saw there.
Right, right. So most, like even we work with the Taj Hotels group, so most of their properties are also IGBC rated. Then if you go to, it's both consumer driven and also, as Pranav said, marketing driven, but it also taps into green finance. That's, it's like the best of both worlds. And ESG as a term, for whoever knows it, great, but it originated in finance.
And they
right?
also give special benefit. Government gives a special benefit. And recently, some government or some people, they like municipality, or okay, there is no some special discount on the taxation or other thing.
Right.
So it will encourage other people to go for this.
Right. I think everything can be, I would say, financial benefits outweigh everything else most of the times.
It could be a two-way. Either you penalize them, so they will be scared.
Yeah.
Like any water or wastewater or something is going on.
Yeah.
Or you encourage with a positive thing by giving an incentive.
Yeah. Carrot or stick. Pranav?
Okay, so we can continue. Yeah, and we'll look at some of these regulations more closely going forward, and there is a consolidation also that is happening that we'll be able to see. So the entire ESG ecosystem, which, as Aro mentioned, originated in finance, but now the ecosystem is quite evolved and quite maturing very rapidly. But it gets difficult to navigate this entire ecosystem. Who are the major players in this? What's happening here? So at the center of ESG ecosystem, we can say there is ESG reporting standards or regulations. There is the standards like GRI or CSRD or BRSR and others. There is also a lot of intergovernmental ESG initiatives, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, IPCC or Paris Agreement, which recently came in. There are key global ESG related regulations or regulations which are actively pushing a lot of ESG and sustainability topics. Recently, World Economic Forum focused a lot on this topic. There is also New York Climate Week, UNDP, and a lot of other events that continuously happen in this space. Then there are a layer of basically, I would say, more implementation and operational aspects. So these would be ESG data providers or ESG platforms. So they really help you understand what are the ESG data that you need to collect, or if you need any benchmarking data, external data that can also be available. And on the other side, there are the ESG platforms that will help you automate and track and measure your entire ESG performance, right from how much water you're consuming, what's your diversity ratio, all of the KPIs that we discussed earlier. So these can be both qualitative as well as quantitative KPIs. And finally, there are a whole host of other supporting agencies, right from ESG rating providers who rate and give confidence into the ESG metrics so that investors know which companies are good, which companies are bad from an ESG point of view. There are ESG consulting companies, and there is ESG external assurance, mainly to communicate all of these to investors and give confidence that some of these players are reporting as per the right templates, as per the right requirements and formats to instill confidence in the capital markets and other aspects. So that's the entire ESG ecosystem, and all of these players are playing a significant role moving up, moving down across the entire space. So just want to quickly touch upon what's the difference between a regulation or a standard and a framework, because this will be a more recurring concept going forward and in throughout the day. So just want to highlight that regulations around ESG would be something like legally binding, where non-compliance leads to a fine or a legal action, similar to, for example, BRSR is mandated, SEBI has mandated that for 1,000 listed companies to report their sustainability performance. Now there are also mandatory requirements to also assure the report from an external auditor, external assurance partner. So these are the regulations. Then there are standards. For example, these are very detailed, replicable standards. For example, there is the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI standard, or SASB in US, where it's more that companies, it provides us framework for companies that these are the parameters that you should report on. These are the approaches you should measure your aspects. So these are a more detailed, replicable instruments to ensure consistent disclosure across different companies, across different sectors. Everybody's on the same page. Then there are frameworks. These are very high level guidance, more that, for example, there is TCFD, there is Sustainable Development Goals, which provides around 7 goals, different goals and different objectives. There is also TCFD, which provides a high level framework around you should embed sustainability, climate change into your strategy, into your governance, into your risk management, these kind of frameworks. And basically why it matters is regulatory compliance is basically mandatory versus standards, frameworks. They more inform you how to comply more effectively. And having a more mature standards or frameworks will help reduce the need for future regulations. Or basically, if a lot of companies are already on a new standard or a framework, then the new regulations can follow. This is what we are seeing also in a lot of industries and a lot of sectors. Same with green building, as you mentioned, sir, where there is green building is developed more as a standard and a framework where voluntarily a lot of companies took it up. And now it provides a lot of different regulations that can be imposed later on. There is also BS6, BS4, like the vehicles, where these kind of things are also coming in. So yes, would like to hand it over to Aro now to take it to.
Thanks, Pranav. So this is a historical context also, but will also show a trend that's happening, right? So 97 started with the first reporting of the GRI. It is still the largest or the most adopted framework or most adopted standard, I would say. So we have established standards, give more definitive guidance. Frameworks are broad and just give a broad prescription. And regulations are, it could be in India regulate that all companies will have to do GRI. So that could be a regulation, right? So here in 97, it started as a bunch of companies came together and said, let's start disclosing non-financial metrics. And it became a coalition, consortium, and then it became eventually a body that prescribed how this is supposed to be done. And then it was more peer influence driven, and it was still in this realm, right? in the voluntary and greenwashing realm, because and greenwashing is a bad term to use there. Not everyone was greenwashing, but there was enough scope to greenwash because the guidance is not set in stone. There is no audits, there is no assurance on the data, and you could say I'm a green enterprise. Nobody will be there to really check or even cross check. So early movers started that wave. Then we had more and more structure coming in where GHG protocol started giving guidance as to just your carbon numbers, which are one key metric in the whole ESG space. The most that even organizations today struggle with is just carbon accounting, right? So then GHG protocol came into play, and now it's evolved into a whole structured protocol giving very detailed guidance on different sectors. But back then it was still small, starting out, still voluntary. And as we move towards the right, so 2000, 2002, CDP started. A lot of us would have heard about CDP. It started with carbon disclosure. Now it has climate elements as well. In 2006, and all the way till this decade was more about now embedding this into the financial ecosystem even further. So the PRI was formed where all the investors came together and said, okay, let's pledge to invest responsibly. And then it became a UN body called UNPRI, right? So PRI is for Principles for Responsible Investment there. Then SASB standards evolved as a continuation to that theme of being more investor centric. So ESG is still now being looked at as an investor driven mandate where investors care about risks, so they care about financial risk. But when it comes to ESG, it could also be things like environmental risk. If there is a law that's about to come and you are an energy guzzler today, right? So investor would be kind of wary of investing in your business. So SASB evolved as a more investor-focused, investor-centric standard. And then it kept following that theme. There was some momentum on how can we genuinely make progress and make things better. That's when science-based targets came in and said, I will give a guiding principle to really manage once you've measured, right? So all of this is about measuring and disclosing data. Now here we're starting to look at how can we transform our business, how can we set actionable targets. And then it follows the same order, but towards the right, all of these disclosures or taxonomies or frameworks are becoming more mandatory, where the NFRD was launched in the EU, which became what CSRD is today, which we were talking about earlier. And that was hyper focused on non-financial reporting, right? NFRD is for non-financial reporting. Now, CSRD is Corporate Sustainability Directive. It's an evolution of that. But this NFRD and CSRD, they both are mandatory. In 2021, we had BRSR in India. That's again a mandatory and a regulated framework, regulated standard. The EU taxonomy is mandated. The Uyghur law is mandated. SEC climate disclosures are still going up and down because now with the Trump administration, maybe that might not come into force. But towards the right and after 2015, the push has been to more mandatory, more regulated, and more data-driven disclosures. And even in all of these, a emerging theme is also assurance, right? You can't just say I did this. You have to prove I did this. I really made progress. The numbers I've accounted for are correct. And now it's moving into this era of non-financial bookkeeping or non-financial accounting, right? That's where a lot of data play happens, a lot of accounting is required. So I think this covers the landscape overall. There are, of course, hundreds of regulations now and hundreds of frameworks. So it is chaotic, and consolidation is also happening. So a lot of these frameworks have rolled into IFRS. Some of these are versions of IFRS in different geographies. And without going more technical, just at a high level, we will understand how regulations are positioned, right? So India has BRSR, then EU has a bunch of regulations. There is one regulation that deals with all non-financial reporting. That's called the CSRD. Then there's a deforestation-free regulation where any commodity that is entering into the EU market, it has to be deforestation-free. So many of our customers now will also look for a EUDR traceability. So if I am procuring things like even packaging material, there would be a tree that was cut for it. Now that tree should not come from a deforestation protected zone, right? So that's another mandate, and it's coming into force next year in Europe. It is delayed by 1 year. Then there's CBAM that's coming up. Again, that's a carbon border adjustment mechanism, where it's one of its kind, where now the taxation on carbon and carbon pricing is coming into play. So any imports into Europe, uh, the importer should have paid taxes based on how much emissions the produce has created in its journey, and we'll talk about CBAM in a little more detail. Uh, then there's SFDR. So we see EU a lot, right? So EU is hyper regulated. If we are working in India and we are supplying to Europe, we will get a lot of compliance, and it's better to jump on the ESG bandwagon sooner than later. If it's US, it's still a lot relaxed. And I think last week and a couple of weeks back, we had a lot of conversations in the EU, and they are almost struggling with this, right? It's become so chaotic that so many companies, the ESG leaders, the sustainability leaders there, would voice that we are a over-regulated market and we are competing with the US, right? And US is so under-regulated that ease of doing business is way high. So why should we struggle complying to all of these regulations, whereas US has a free hand on all of these, right? So a lot of this is shaped by typically these larger players. So now the Trump administration coming in, a lot of changes are bound to happen. So we've already seen some, I would say, chaos happening even in Europe, where even France is saying we should push back on some regulations, right? Then others are also. So now it's also a reverse pull for ESG that we are seeing, where European regulators are saying we'll ease the regulations, we'll try to consolidate, reduce the regulations, but the 400 large companies there have come together and written a pact that we don't want the regulations to soften, we just want there to be enough time to comply. So we don't want a flip switch transition, we want like a phased transition, but we want to do reporting. Whereas the regulator is now saying, no, you do less reporting because US is doing less reporting. So again, UK largely, there are no set mandates in UK, but it still follows a lot of European mandates because a lot of transactions and business holdings are in Europe. A lot of consolidation on ISSB side. So this is emerging as one key standard globally. It's an evolution of SASB, TCFD, all of them coming together and rolling up into the Financial Standards Board, and IFRS came into play. Now ISSB and versions of ISSB are becoming regulations around the globe. So Australia has launched something called ASRS. It's similar to ISSB, only some custom elements to it. Malaysia has started this. Many other geographies are also adopting ISSB. And when we are engaging with the Gulf region, so Saudi, UAE, all of these nations are also more likely to lean towards ISSB because, again, it's more investor focused and they are set to raise more and more funds. Yeah, so there is a lot of these regulations, right? But just as a trend, we don't need to go deep into any of these. But just as a trend, so India is of course there, but there is one mandate now. RBI is coming up with more regulations. It's still in discussion, but Europe still seems way over regulated, right? Everyone else is like one or two regulations. Rest adoption of frameworks, of course, will happen, right? So yeah, with that, I will invite Pranav to go deeper on few of these regulations that are big. and that are seeming to be bigger, right? They'll expand in scope.
Yeah, thanks, Aro. We'll be taking a closer look at quickly some of the key regulations that are important, that are also important for Indian companies which are working in these geographies. So basically in 2023, sorry, the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive came into force, short form for CSRD. And this is going to impact 50,000 companies. The reporting has started from this year, where companies need to publish their CSRD reports from this year onwards for large companies, and there is a phased kind of an approach that we'll be seeing soon in the details next. So here it's mostly, it's not just impacting the EU companies, but also international companies. 10,000 international companies will be impacted who are who have subsidiaries in Europe, who have sister companies, partnerships, and other players in Europe. So this is basically a new regulation, and then CSRD aims to ensure that companies provide a very comprehensive, consistent, and high quality sustainability information. All the non-financial data, so financial data anyway every company is putting out there into a financial report, but all the non-financial data across their at group level, across their subsidiaries, across their supply chains, suppliers, they need to put it out there and or get it audited as well. So there is another agency called the European Sustainability Reporting Standard, ESRS, which provides a detailed framework. So CSRD is like a regulation. You need to comply with this, otherwise you will be penalties. There will be, I guess even there is the last penalty, which is jail time as well. It's still a bit being discussed. But yeah, there are a lot of penalties and fines at different levels. And then there is a ESRS standard, which is more providing a detailed templates as to how to report, what are the metrics or what are the parameters you should report on and get verified. Similar to how a financial report is structured, so ESRS's job is to structure the sustainability, the CSRD disclosures. So what are the ESRS requirements? So basically under the CSRD regulation, these are the mandatory ESRS requirements. So there are basically cross-cutting standards. So this is more, as you can see, goes into a more of a template form, similar to how BRSR is there, similar to how a financial report is there. Similarly, the CSRD report will have to be structured. There will be general principles, general disclosures, which are cross-cutting and mandatory for all companies, irrespective of their sectors and size and areas. So overall, across ESRS, there are 1,200 KPIs or data points. So companies need to report on, so overall there are 1,200 KPIs. And companies need to identify and explain why each of the topic is material to them, important to them. For example, climate change is important. What are the parameters that you need to report on? In pollution, air pollution, water pollution, you need to report on some of these parameters. And if you're saying that some of the parameter is not important to you, for example, water resources is not important to me, my company is not working in this area, still you will have to give an explanation to EU that why water is not an important for you, and you have to give an explanation. So that's why it's a bit of a complicated regulation where you can't just skip some of these elements saying that, oh, I don't deal in biodiversity, I don't have a lot of natural products in my supply chain. I will. It's okay if I don't report on ESRS E4 standard, for example, but you'll have to give an explanation of why that's the case. Explain how your business is structured and these areas. So overall, yeah, there are 1,200 data points, and there are somewhat around 840 qualitative standards and 320 data points which are more quantitative and data driven across all of these areas. So yeah, who must report on CSRD? As you can see, this is a huge regulation. So there was a lot of backlash from a lot of companies saying that we can't comply from day one on this regulation. So there is a cascading timeline. So basically, all the large companies, similar to how we have 1,000 listed companies, companies who are already subjected to NFRD, which was a previous version of this regulation, which was a very light regulation. Only few KPIs were required. So very large companies need to report on this from this year onwards. So based on the 2024 data, they will file in 2025 publicly the report for CSRD. Then the next year onwards, there will be other large set of companies which, and there are parameters. For example, companies who have total assets of more than 20 million euros, who have a net turnover of 40 million euros or 500 employees or more, need to report from this year onwards. And then the other companies will be reporting from next year, and then it will trickle down to also SMEs, so small medium enterprises. And finally, it's in the fourth layer where a lot of Indian companies also will be impacted, which are doing a lot of operations in Europe, with Europe, who have subsidiaries listed there. So they need to also report on this.
I have a point to add. So ESRS in structure is very similar to how BRSR is in India. It has a similar scope, similar set of KPIs. It is a bit, I would say the push is a little more, and it's the phase out or the phased rollout is way well structured. But BRSR also has a similar plan, right, where it starts from these 1,000 companies, then goes on to onboarding more. I think the stock exchange has 5,400 companies now, so that will be the next target, and then all the way to SMEs. So here they have listed a more forward-looking roadmap with exact years, but this is very similar. And why we are talking about some of these global regulations is because they are not far from touching Indian companies, right? So very soon ESRS, CBAM, EUDR, all of these are going to somewhere appear in our circles because businesses don't function in a vacuum, as Pranav said earlier. So since we are dependent on so many economies across the globe, it's important to kind of a little bit get a perspective on what's happening around us, so that we can make choices more consciously tomorrow, right? When we are adopting a newer regulation, newer reporting framework, can we adopt something that cuts across ESRS, ASRS, all the geographies we are supplying to? For example, if I am a business and BRSR is the regulation that I have to follow, can I also follow, for example, SASB or IFRS for that matter? And that flows directly or links directly to ASRS, that links directly to ASRS, and that covers a broad set of global regulations that I might be required to, right? So when a organization is deciding on their ESG roadmap for a year, for 3 years, for 5 years, it's also important to look at what's happening globally and then make a perspective, right? Am I going to stick only with my regulations, and until absolutely someone comes and puts a gun to my head and says, no, you have to do it, then I'll do it, which is a fair approach, but it has to be your approach. But all of this information will be somewhere helpful there, right? So thanks Pranav.
Yeah. And so so there has been a phased implementation plan, giving sufficient time for smaller companies to actually learn from larger companies. And in BRSR also they mentioned that voluntarily a lot of small medium enterprises should start reporting on BRSR, at least for themselves, at least for their stakeholders like investors and employees and others. So what is the objective of this whole regulation? The first one, of course, is to increase the transparency and accountability. Then it's to provide stakeholders with a very reliable, comparable ESG information. Right now, how there is the financial reporting where you know if a company is good, basically profitable or not. It's very easy to compare across different sectors, across different geographies. Similarly, the idea is for CSRD that people will be able to compare performance of different companies on these non-financial parameters, and it will be comparable across different sectors, across different industries and areas. It's also to align sustainable reporting with financial reporting standards to look at a company not just from a very financial point of view, but also from a holistic point of view of other aspects which will have an impact on their financial performance, like the resources they are consuming, the water, the employees, the governance structures that they have. So all of these things already, to an extent, the financial is the reporting is more of an outcome of all of these inputs. Right now we are going a bit down the value chain and also tracking the inputs that are going into this financial reporting systems. And finally, to enhance the corporate governance and risk management so that companies and investors and consumers also foresee some of these risks, that this company is going into a sector which will have an impact going forward due to climate change, due to for example recent incidences of wildfires in California and others, wherein insurance companies have stopped insuring all the assets in California for fire. This will have an impact. So governments, companies can foresee some of these changes happening and take steps. It can be good or bad. In this case, it was bad, where insurance companies foresaw that these risks would be very catastrophic if they insure property. So they are not insuring a lot of properties there. So it can be also positive in the other side. And what are the key requirements around CSRD is, of course, annual reporting. Every year companies need to publish this report. They need to do something called double materiality assessment, where they need to understand the financial impact of sustainability issues and what impacts are on the society. They need verification and assurance is an important parameter. They can't just put out the information saying this is my information. They need to get it audited, verified by an external third party agency and publish that report as well. Supply chain is also an important component where it's not just my own boundaries but also my top suppliers, top 10, top 50, top 100 suppliers. You need to disclose their information as well, and then alignment with other standards. So that's the more high level objectives. Quickly, in the essence of time, also going through some one more regulation which is around EUDR, and then would hand it over to Aro to discuss more around sectoral implications a bit. But EUDR is basically European Union Deforestation Regulation, which Aro recently touched upon. As you can see, that this regulation impacts 6 categories of products like cocoa, coffee, soya, palm oil, cattle, beef, and rubber. And there is another 7th which is on wood. Now, why do you think this will be important is a lot of FMCG companies, a lot of food companies will be impacted by this regulation, who are exporting a lot of packaging goods, food products, biscuits, Britannia. A lot of large companies who are exporting to Europe will be impacted. Like, for example, what does it say? Are you sourcing all of these products into a deforestation-free, degradation-free zones? So you are not unethically sourcing your cocoa, coffee, soybean, soy, palm oil, or all of these goods. And you need to disclose that information onto your packagings and publish your reports as well.
So deforestation, one of the biggest reasons for deforestation is agriculture actually. Surprisingly, we would think it's the built environment and all the wood going into making your paper and everything. But it's largely agriculture that's causing a lot, agriculture and animal husbandry, of course. So that's why some of these categories like cocoa, coffee, it's even where it's grown, where it's cultivated, right? Because it has to come from a deforestation free or deforestation protected reserve should not be affected. And there is a huge data set that we also have on our platform where on the global map, there is an identifier that this region, which appears in green, is a deforestation protected area. So we capture all the supply chain information for a given product. For example, a corrugated packaging box, that is the last level packaging of your finished good. Even that cannot come from a deforestation free area. So it's that granular. It's not like even about your core product, but even all the materials that go around the product into packaging, into transport, distribution, all of that you have to be responsible for. And Europe is very harsh when it comes to regulations, right? Once they regulate it, they will kind of block your shipments at the border if this does not get met. Again, this is getting into force from next year, coming into force from next year. And I think last year the dialogue ended. In December there was a parliamentary vote,
Yeah.
and most I think they won by 3/4 kind of a majority. And then interestingly, that vote didn't go through, so that election was kind of cancelled. And now the mandate is, unless someone proposes a very interesting new regulation, this regulation is to stay. So from 2026, this will come into force, where shipments will start to get blocked in the EU and even UK borders. Yeah.
Yeah, so this timeline also is because a lot of large companies requested that it be put off, and then that's why it will be now kicking in from next year onwards, giving some time for companies to get a visibility, get a traceability of their entire value chain, from where they are procuring their cocoa, for example, for making their chocolates, where they are securing their coffee, cattle and beef, or palm oil. So traceability will be an important angle here for this regulation, to have a full visibility of where your products are coming from. At least the companies need to know, and then later on they can start communicating that to the consumers. So again, it has a cascading timeline. As you can see, the discussion started in 2019 onwards, but there was a lot of pushback by a lot of companies. On all of these large companies will be impacted because all of these products are in our everyday foods that we consume, some bit of this. So there was a pushback, and now the deadline has been from 2026 onwards on this timeline. And what companies need to report on is, firstly, they need to collect this information. They need to ask their suppliers where you are securing your cocoa from, where you are securing your rubber from. They need to do a risk assessment. Is this supplier risky? Is this geography risky for me? They need to sustain their concerns, basically investigate, check if the supplier is also true. So the onus is also on companies to validate the claims of their suppliers, because suppliers are mostly small companies who would say that, yeah, we are not, for example, Amazon forest, or for example, a lot of forests in Thailand or other areas, we are not procuring from these areas, we are not sourcing products from these areas. But companies need to trace and substantiate these concerns. And they need to also implement risk mitigation plans. So if a supplier comes in which is giving products from this, what is their action plans? So develop an don't use these products, use these products, so those kind of things, or use this for different geographies, those kind of things also would come in. And then finally, publish a due diligence statement that these products are free from deforested, these products have been not secured from deforestation areas. So that's more it. So this regulation is more process driven, where there is a lot of work companies need to do internally to implement. And there are a lot of challenges, opportunities. So the origin of the product is an issue, and it's difficult to trace, but there is an opportunity that there is to develop innovative solutions. Of course, there is cost increase because to have all of these visibility into these areas, but there is human rights which can be an opportunity where you can secure some of these areas. There is also a risk for suppliers. But there is a favor that you can work with long-term suppliers. You can work with trustworthy suppliers who have also implemented a lot of these things. And there is bureaucratic burden as well associated with it. And there are some opportunities also, because the opportunities would be moats or entry barriers. Large companies who have implemented these things efficiently will get access to a lot of these markets freely, and will maybe also reduce the competition. Would like to hand it over to Aaron.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, I can go very quickly with the CBAM. We discussed this a little bit earlier as well. So it's a mechanism to adjust carbon pricing and carbon taxes globally. So EU is mandating that all the products that come into EU should have paid an equivalent tax in their geography. If they don't have an equivalent carbon pricing to EU pricing, right? So it's a similar scenario where at the customs gate, if you do not provide a CBAM certificate, the customs might stop your shipment, stop your goods from actually entering the EU. And it is actually the importer's responsibility, but we all know that's never going to be true, right? Importers always have, in most cases, have more leverage on whoever the supplier is. And suppliers can be medium to large, but European importers do have a lot of leverage. So they will push Indian suppliers, for example, to comply and to give all of this in a structured format to these companies. So we have so many customers who are now requesting us to create CBAM reports for them because they are European exports oriented, right? So it is still applicable to key industries, right? So cement, electricity, iron and steel, fertilizer, hydrogen. The commonality between all of these is these are energy guzzlers, right? These industries create most amount of emissions apart from oil and gas.
And just want to add that
Yeah.
there is a lot of conversation that is happening. The Indian government or the China is also having with EU to reduce these regulations or impact, because this will impact a lot of Indian companies. This will increase the cost of, for example, the Indian steel, aluminium, a lot of these products exported to EU markets.
Yeah, and iron and steel is actually, India is doing very well. We launched the first green taxonomy very recently for green steel taxonomy basically. That's one of the first globally. So green steel has been around, but India now has a green steel taxonomy where there is a good classification system as to what qualifies as green steel and how that has to be managed, how that has to be computed. But all of that is somewhere aligning with this common theme of carbon adjustment across borders. And who pays the price, right? In the end, you can either push it to the consumer, you won't ever bear it as a business because it affects your general sustainability, financial sustainability. So that is where a lot of turbulence and tumult is going on, just to understand who pays the price, right? Importers are not ready, consumers will, of course, the markets are typically price sensitive. So unless there is a sourcing premium to any of these products, and these are commodities, right? How can you say, how can you request a end user to buy a greener steel and pay, let's say, even 5 rupees more, right? They'll go with any steel that's available. So yeah, that's again an implementation timeline. The definitive phase starts next year, and everyone who comes under these 6 categories, even in India, has started to prepare for CBAM because it's looking like it's going to stay, and it's going to be big for even Indian exports, largely on cement, iron and steel, right, and aluminium. So that's, yeah, there are of course complexities because it is one of a kind, so it's pioneering. That's why it's also something that requires enough processes, enough audit, enough assurance. So there is scope for consulting, advisory, tech. Everyone has to come into play to help with this, right? People don't understand carbon pricing today. CBAM is fairly complex. However, once you understand the basics, it becomes simple. It in the end is about how much data you're collecting and how can you compress that, calculate it according to a particular template. The pricing models and everything EU has already prescribed. So any company that is falling under that radar, happy to do a conversation offline. And BRSR, to end the regulations part of things, most of us are already a little bit familiar, and this is the Indian regulation. So it follows the national guidelines on responsible business conduct, and there were 9 principles that have now been rolled into a standard, and top 1,000 companies in India are reporting on this already. They've been doing this for last 3 years now, and it is divided into 3 sections. It covers environmental factors similar to what CSRD did or CSRD does, ESRS does. ESRS came after BRSR, NFRD was there, but the standard itself came after BRSR. There is value chain reporting. There is a dedicated session on BRSR and value chain reporting later this day. So I think we'll cover a lot of this in that session. And of course, there is a timeline to even the assurance requirements on BRSR, right? So there is a reasonable assurance that you have to get on core disclosures, and that has already started, but the scope of the companies that will have to get assurance keeps expanding yearly. And then the overall companies reporting on BRSR will also keep expanding, right? So 9 principles, I think it's a little jumbled, but yeah, 1 to 9. And we'll cover this a lot more in detail. Just going into, so we've already covered a lot of this, and in the interest of time, I'll skip some of this. So we've established that globally there is a huge, I would say, dialogue on ESG, but also action on ESG, right? Where starting from the onset of this century, it has in last 20-25 years now became a ginormous industry in itself, where just the servicing market within ESG is huge, right? There is so much consulting, so much money Big Fours have made, so much money boutique firms have made, so much money firms like Credible have made in just helping companies with data, advisory firms have made. So it's a industry of its own now. It's cutting close or catching up with the financial accounting and advisory industry. And even with the Trump administration, the general consensus is that these administrations will come and go, but in the long term, it is established that climate change is real, economies are struggling, we need to balance the triage of people, planet and profit, otherwise nobody will be here, right? So I think there is general consensus that there might be fluctuations, but the common theme is all are united for this purpose, and it cuts across all sectors, right? And that's why there is so much compliance conversations. But I think more than compliance, the voluntary disclosures have increased even higher, right? So compliance, I think in last 3 years has increased by 3 times or something, and then voluntary compliance is a way bigger number, right? It's not even fully documented how much the voluntary disclosure market is. Wow, okay, I skipped a bunch of this. And what are the benefits to summarize, right? It definitely has a play in your brand reputation. It increases your competitiveness, meaning even for companies like ours, who are less headcount, very lean startup style companies, our footprint is very low, right? But when we are approaching customers to help them with their ESG journey, their ESG data management, in their RFP there will be one caveat: have you disclosed your carbon numbers in the past, right? So even competitiveness in that sense is increasing. So we have in the past not qualified for few RFPs just because we didn't have a sustainability report or sustainability disclosures. But this is more common in industries like logistics, services industries, where your buyers are going to eventually switch to a vendor who's giving them more data and more transparency into their sustainability position. There is a cost benefit to it. So companies who have CSOs can prove it to the board. Companies who do not will rely on external advisors to prove it to their board that there is a cost reduction. Because effectively, how do you reduce something like carbon emissions, right? You cut down on resource consumption, or you consume resources more efficiently, which comes at a reduced cost, increased revenue, and you can affect both your top line and bottom line, right? Overall revenue that you can get from the market, you can expand to new market segments, but you can also increase your operational efficiency. So the margins can also considerably increase. And we work with some of the companies who are celebrated for their ESG posture now. Hotel companies, even organizations like Wellspun, who have done really well in the past in general competitiveness because of ESG, as well as increased revenue because of ESG, right? So those case studies are quite popular. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And we covered some of these steps I wanted Pranav to cover this, but I can quickly summarize, right? So it is important to internalize and decide what is your requirements when it comes to picking a framework. Talking to external advisors helps, but it's more business context that you need to think of, short term, medium term, and long term, and then decide what is a one size fit all approach, or you can go hyper specific on your focus area for this year. Then conducting internal risk assessment. What are my risks, right? Is my risk more on the supply chain side? Then I need to invest in more of supply chain sustainability. If I'm way upstream, where I don't do a lot, but I buy from a lot of people and either trade, or I'm a garment manufacturer where most of my supply chain is not vertically integrated, then I need more risk assessment on the supply chain side. But if I am a retail operation, if I have retail chains around the globe, then I need to look at a different angle of compliance, different angle of risk. So risk assessment from the lens of your organization would look very different. Then implementing this whole documentation and reporting, where the data chaos comes in, where all of this accounting miscalculation, misreporting risk creeps up. Just where to start, right? How do I start? That comes in this phase. Once you have decided that I am picking GRI framework for my reporting, what does it mean? It means I have to magically create 800 data points from my organization, and as a small team or as an individual, I can't really do it, right? So it's then deciding the SOPs, the governance structure around how this data will be collected from different users, who owns what disclosure, who does the sanity check, and in the end, if it's a regulation, the mandate would be signed, or the document would in the end be signed by the CFO or the company secretary, right? So how can you give them the confidence that without going hands-on with ESG, how can they confidently sign that document, right? So your governance process has to be right, and then that needs a lot of cultural shift and technology adoption, right? So this is only going to be a more chaotic place to be in for at least the next 5 years, and after that we will see more consolidation. We are already seeing that, but with recent regulations and this political landscape changing, I think next 5 years it's going to be chaotic.
Yeah, so just wanted to add that taking a very kind of a full stack kind of an approach to really reduce the cost of compliance will be a key role here. That's where technology can help, that's where people can help, that's where setting up systems in place to train these people will help. So the focus of course can be around reducing the cost of compliance for meeting these regulations, and that's where you can look at a lot of these technologies and other pieces that can fit them.
Right. So 4 takeaways for this session, right? One is to know your regulatory scope. Second is to strengthen your data and assurance, not just external partner driven assurance, but are you doing the right thing internally? Treating compliance as part of strategy, because you can really change the game, you can change the equation of it being a cost center to a revenue driver, or a tool to increase your margins, be more efficient and as an organization. And the fourth, which is the most important right now, is to stay alert and evolve with the growing space, right, which ESG is. So thank you everyone, wonderful having a full house here, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day, but happy to take questions if they are, right? I think, yeah, so there is one gentleman behind, then we could come to you.
Actually, we are exporter in Gulf and African countries.
Okay.
And we are third party manufacturer.
Right.
Just like merchant exporter.
Right.
But in our brand. So these rules apply to our company also?
Not right now, but most Gulf countries, so Saudi, UAE,
Iraq, Saudi,
right. So
Turkey.
at least Saudi and UAE have a clear defined goal. They are calling it Vision 2030, and it's more cross-cutting. So Vision 2030 has financial goals, has supply chain goals, and has sustainability goals. So with Vision 2030, what they are going to do in the next, I
Maybe
think,
10 years.
No, within 5 years,
Okay.
you will have to report some numbers to them. It won't be a full-blown reporting style, but at least your high-level metrics like product carbon footprint, or your organization level carbon numbers. Today there is no regulation, but I think before 2030 it will arrive, because we are already talking to the UAE and at least Saudi bodies are very close to implementing this at a regulation level, right?
So they are actually a lot of developing a lot of taxonomies. So KSA is developing a taxonomy, green taxonomy. Right now they are in the define phase where which product is green, which product is not green. So they are working on that, and soon there can be a regulation.
So your company is providing like from scratch, like how to go ahead. Is there any?
We can enable that. Our company Credible essentially is a software play, it's a tech platform, but then we come in a little later after the advisory is done, after your goals are clear, how to manage this operation internally using a tech platform. That's where we come in. But then we have network partnerships that can help with all of this, understanding the space, getting prepared for regulations, preparing these reports, all of that. So we can have that conversations for sure.
Okay.
I think the gentleman here also had a question.
Hello. Yeah, in 23, in G20,
Yeah.
there was an amount disclosed due to corrosion because of this carbon emission. It is a $2.3 trillion. Okay. People are maintaining, all the industry people are spending money $2.3 trillion to wipe out this corrosion.
Right.
So this is indirectly, it is a saving of the amount if you are
Absolutely.
going for a green thing.
Absolutely.
And the amount is not as small.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there is something called a transition to green economy.
Yes,
Right,
because
so-
if you transition, then this amount will be saved.
Correct. So oil and gas industry will probably
Yeah.
struggle
All-
the
all-
most.
all large
Yeah,
industry.
all large industries. So that's correct, and it's a daunting number, but it's also multiplying very
Yeah.
fast. So next year the number will be 2x, then it will be 5x or 10x. So great point.
Excuse me, in
Yeah.
that context, do you provide any sort of support to the industries in carbon credit trading? In carbon credit trading, when we are talking so much of carbon and we have discussed,
Yeah.
but from my own experience from the industry background, I know the trading of carbon credit can give a lot of revenue, and they need a lot of consultancy support as
Correct.
to how to lodge the claim and how to do it rightly so that they are eligible for the carbon credit. Do you give anything in that? Do you work in that area?
We directly don't work. Again, as I said, we are hyper focused on technology, but we have partnerships who do. So right from developing carbon credits, then there are, so developer of carbon credit, verifier of carbon credit, they have to be separate entities, and we have networks with both. And then just managing these carbon credits, retiring them at the right time, all of that advisory, that's a third discussion, right? But we can of course enable, if that's a use case for you, we can have that conversation. Right.
That is the
yeah.
thing there people are working right now. Like it is in C20, Citizen 20 of all the global.
Yeah.
So what is how you can finance these people? They don't. The government doesn't finance them. Who the people, company or people, those who are producing this carbon, they have to fund
Correct. They are
to the
project
people those who are
developers.
into green thing.
Correct.
Because they are producing, and it is not
Right.
there is India or any other country.
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
for global.
Correct.
And like airlines has been given some guideline that you need to pay certain amount to particular people, those who are into this green thing.
Yeah. So that's how offsets market typically works. There are project developers who will generate credits because of some good deed they are doing. Now that classification of good deed is also very structured now. It cannot be anything or any saving. It has to be well structured, and then once you develop the carbon credit, then you can trade it. Basically, one carbon credit is a ton of carbon emissions that you can offset. So if you are heavy industry, to achieve net zero or to even claim carbon neutrality, you will have to do it, and that's why more energy heavy industries will buy large amount of offsets. But it's again not a sustainable market per se, because there will be always this imbalance, right, that you are uprooting here and planting somewhere else, it still does a lot of damage to this particular region. And that, I think, is shifting the global climate scenario even further. To an extent that, you will uh, erode a lot of forest land from Mumbai, and then you will plant trees in some remote island which already had more trees. You will just force, so you are creating ecological imbalance in both places. So I think now that also is being hyper regulated and closely watched. But the long term fix or the long term solution is finding more, I would say, potentials in energy sources and energy independence, right? Right now, the biggest problems of the world are energy oriented. To make products, you need energy. You transport products, you need energy. And most sources of energy are fossil fuels, coal, gas. So that, I think, needs a bigger shift. And carbon credits market, of course, it has become a financial product. It is here to stay. But I think, yeah, it's an evolving dialogue there also.
Well traded, like stock exchange, it is
Correct,
well traded.
very well traded. So I think we are at time. So when is the next session?
So everyone has to fill the form so we can share with the PPT.
Yeah.
And there is a networking tea coffee break for 15
Okay.
minutes.
There is a coffee break outside. So once you filled the form, we'll use the form to send you some more information around this and also open a dialogue for your specific areas of concern, focus areas for next year. So please fill the form, have coffee. I'll meet everyone
In 15
outside.
minutes, we will start the second session.
Yeah, next session is around climate change and climate risk management. So
Start around 12.
we'll start around 12. My watch is not working. So in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Thank you so much again.